Toni Morrison said, all art is knowing when to stop. And that, my friends, is the secret to the question of knowing when your art is done. We're going to paint today, but our painting will be an experiment in self-control and an exercise in restraint. And I hope for many of you, this will be one of the most important art-making experiences you will have in a long time. I know that's a tall order, but let's see what happens. Yeah, let's get to sketching and we'll chat about what in the heck I mean by all this. I'm using an HB pencil, it's one of my favorites, and I'm starting with a basic circle to denote the center of this dahlia flower. And friends, I am going to link an inspiration photo below. And then within that center, the even more center. And now I'm gonna go right in with darker marks. This is darker than I would recommend you going at this stage, but I wanna make sure you can see what I'm doing. And I'm paying really close attention to how the petals curve around that off-center center. The petals that are kind of right in front of you, that are coming right at you, those are your longest petals. And the petals that kind of curve around the center start to get more curved and shorter. You don't see as much of those petals. At the base of the center of this flower, the petals are wider, and then they slowly taper to a point. And you're probably wondering, Christy, well, when are we gonna talk about how to figure out when a painting's done? We are, I promise. Stick with me, friends. Really, just stick around, sketch with me. All right, moving on to the bigger petals of this flower. And I will be honest, friends, I say it a lot. If you're not new here, you know I don't really refer to my reference photo or my subject matter all that much after I get the basic structure or the basic idea of shapes and relationships down. So the center is really important for this particular flower. And so I'm just starting to add petals around the center. The petals that are underneath the center of the flower are seen in more full view. And then the petals that are on the side and the top are shorter. You're not seeing as much because they're curved or they're at a side view. The angle that I'm sketching this from is, imagine like you were directly over top of this dahlia, but then you just started to sit back into your chair. Yeah, that's the angle I'm looking at this from. And yeah, I'm making a lot of this stuff up, but you know what? It looks good to my eye, so I'm gonna keep going. I notice on my inspiration dahlia that the petals that are further out, that are along the outside of the flower, are definitely bigger. They're wider, they're just more in your face. And so I'm following that cue, but still making up the exact placement of the petals and even the exact curve of the petals. I love where those petals come to a fine point, so I'm definitely exaggerating those points. Isn't that the great thing about making art and being an artist? You get to make up the things and exaggerate the things that excite you most. The points of a petal are really important. The direction that a point of a petal is facing really kind of determines the whole curve or direction of the petal. So keep that in mind. If you want your petal to kind of curve around and up to the right of the composition, then adding a little point that does that exact curve is going to really help the look. Think about ways that you can give each of these petals their own personality. I mean, don't completely reinvent the wheel. We've basically got a teardrop shape where one end of the teardrop disappears because it's hiding behind another petal, and the other point of the teardrop is super pointy. But from there, you can kind of create little cuts or notches. Maybe the petal has a tear in it. Maybe one edge of the petal is starting to just curl up a little bit so you can see the underside. You get to make the rules here, and you get to give all of these petals a ton of personality. Before I started this sketch, I took a few moments just to kind of hang out with my flower. And I'm lucky to have one in person. I feel privileged to have it in person because I got to examine some of the characteristics. The petals in the front, full view, I can see a lot more of them because they're coming towards me. And the petals that are in the front, or let's say underneath the center of the flower, those petals are pointing downwards. And then I noticed that the petals on the right-hand side were kind of curving down to the right. And the petals on the left-hand side were kind of either going straight out to the left or curving slightly upwards and to the left. And then the petals that were on top of the center of the flower were mostly pointing straight up. And those observations really helped me get this flower, now that I'm done sketching it, looking pretty darn accurate and botanically correct. And I feel good about it. So take those few extra moments to observe and even make notes about your observations. Don't take too long here because you could get precious really easily. As I start to add the washes of watercolor to this flower, and friends, we're gonna do this twice because I have a lot to say here, but don't go anywhere. It's important. This is mindset and skill when it comes to figuring out when your artwork is done. It takes a lot for me to say, this art is done. In fact, I don't even sign my original paintings that I sell until they are purchased, because I just feel like there might be something that I notice right up until that last moment. And so, yeah. So it's less about being done and knowing exactly when that perfect done moment is in your artwork, and more about knowing that it's time to take a break, time to walk away, time to pause. And it is an instinct that does come, I'm sorry, I know you might not want to hear this, with time and experience. My instinct told me that once the sketch of this dahlia was done, I immediately knew I wanted to continue on. I didn't want to just keep this a sketch. The watercolor needs of this sketch were just screaming to me. So I didn't have to take too much time to decide, and my pause was like literally a few seconds. Here's a tip though. If you're new to all this and you really love your sketch, but you also really want to paint your sketch and fill it in, go ahead and scan your sketch before you paint. And then you have a copy of it. You can then print that sketch out on watercolor paper again and paint it however many times you want. And scanners are so affordable now. I think it's a great tool to have around, and it takes a lot of the pressure off. And scanning your sketches gives you a lot of opportunity to try things again and again, different colors, different shading techniques. It's just fabulous. So let me know in comments if you're like, oh my gosh, getting a scanner today, if you like this tip, because I just think it might change things for you. And while you're at it, if you're having a good time and you're not annoyed by my endless narration yet, would you give this video a boop? That's a like, friends, and it really helps out my channel. All right, let's go back to the dahlia. I want to fill in with some watercolor, and I'm just going in wet on dry with my 1/2" dagger. I am using the Art for Joy's Sake palette. All supplies and info are going to be down below in the description section. And I mixed up this gorgeous pinky purple color, and in my Art for Joy's Sake palette I used my like royal purple, that's not really the name of it, my fuchsia, not the name of it, you get the gist here, and a little bit of that soft creamy light pink, and blended that together to get this gorgeous lilac-y, purpley, pinky color. And I'm just zhuzhing it in, trying to stay within the lines of my sketch. And then I'm popping in, still wet on dry here, other colors, full-blown fuchsia, a little skosh of blue, and then with a wet brush, I have to re-wet the brush, I'm going and just zhuzhing and blending and working that color out towards the edges. It's all very light at this stage until I get to that bottom right corner, and I go ahead and add some juicy on dry fuchsia. If you're curious about the juicy on dry, the wet on wet, the wet on dry, I'm gonna link a video below. It's a good one. And just continue to fill in. The point here and the exercise here, if you will, is to just have fun filling a space with a variation or a gradation of color. Light to dark, dark to light, and then let it all blend with clean water in between. Going in with some darker purple, that's a little bit of that bright purple mixed with a little bit of green that was just sitting in the corner of my palette. And yeah, look at that. She's pretty. All right, I'm gonna take a rest. I feel the instinct to rest here because I really love the look of this wash, but it does feel unfinished. So instead of making a decision, I'm going to pause and add some greenery, friends. Just sketch in some leafy shapes with really kind of bumpy, scratchy, pointy silhouettes. not gonna go too crazy, not a lot of detail here. A bud and 2 leaves. It's got a nice balance for this big full dahlia. Then I'm going back in with my 3/4 inch dagger brush, and I'm going to use that same wet on dry technique to fill in the shapes. At this point, you might be thinking, girl, what did you do? Just create a coloring page? And yeah, basically I did, but nothing wrong with that. A little tip I have for these really fun, soft transition fills of watercolor washes is every time you go back to the palette to reload your color, choose a different color in the same family. So I started with that really pretty like emerald green, and then when I went back, I didn't rinse my brush and I grabbed a little bit of olive and a little bit of fluorescent yellow and just see what happens. All right, I'm feeling that itch in my creative soul. Like I need to make a decision here. Is this painting nearly done? Do I love this kind of like pencil and wash, this spin on line and wash? Am I gonna walk away and feel like she's done? And I'll be honest, friends, I have no idea at this point. I don't know. And I've become really okay and really comfortable with not knowing when it comes to my art over the years. And I guess that's the point of today's video, beyond what you might have learned about sketching and washes and all that. The point is, let's get really comfortable. Let's be really okay with not knowing what we want to do next in our painting. And knowing for sure though, that it's time to take a break. It's time to say, I'm done for now. And you might say, well, that's great for you, Christy, but you have that instinct of experience behind you, and you know that when you come back to the painting, you're probably gonna have a good idea of what to do next. But I don't know what to do next. Here's a couple of things that you can do to figure out after the break, after you come back, what to do next with your painting. Number 1, take a minute, time yourself if you have to, and look through some of your older paintings, some things that you've done before. Find a few things that you like, maybe a way that you added detail. Maybe you went into something with ink after a watercolor wash. Whatever it is, find it, and that might give you some inspiration of what to do next. Number 2, just work on something else for a few days. So maybe you come back to paint next day and the day after that, and you're not really feeling any specific inspiration for this painting yet. Work on something else. It will come to you. Number 3, realize that if it doesn't come to you, maybe she is done. And all of this, friends, is going towards the beautiful act of building habits and building experience that all leads to really strong, beautiful instincts in your art making. So do you want to see what I like to do next with a painting like this? If I feel that nudge to take it further, watch this dahlia video next for a lot of inspiration on how to add details to your dahlias. And friends, you know what I'm gonna say. Happy painting until we meet again.